Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Oh, my goodness. I got to adjust my levels here. All right. Well, we had, I think in fixing, quote unquote, fixing the sound issues that I have over Zoom when I'm speaking with Greg. I don't know. I must have reset something. It sounded like my soundboard levels were a little low, and I don't know. We'll see how the microphone levels are. But first I tried maybe I thought I might have lowered the volume in my own headphones. And I boosted that, and nope. I don't know if that didn't fix anything for the rest of you, but it certainly made for a booming entrance for me in my own headphones. All right, we'll see how everything goes. As long as the sound is carried, we're fine. And of course, Greg isn't even planning on stopping by today. But it was very exciting to have engineered a successful fix for the problem. We tested it out. We're excited to go. We just didn't let you hear any of it because it took all of Wednesday and Thursday to fix it. But I think we got it now, and you'll have evidence of that on Monday. In the meantime, you'll need evidence of what's happening in your country, which you are likely getting probably from, who knows, let's say the newspaper, social media. I don't know what percentage of our audience do you think gets their news from TikTok? Probably pretty low. I mean, or at least, I guess, probably only a low percentage of the audience would admit getting news from TikTok. And I don't think anybody would say it was their primary news source. But every time I see one of the surveys on this thing, I'm surprised and dismayed to find out that apparently if you're younger than 24 or so, you might, in fact, be getting all of your news from TikTok. Which, by the way, guys, chiefly, in the main, probably not actually news. It's what we're doing, which is fine, right? It's not a bad thing. It's just podcasting in teeny tiny bits. They're reading the newspaper, I guess, probably just the same as we are. I don't know if they're reading them. Well, I guess we'll say it this way. As well, maybe. I don't know what their reading skills are and their critical skills in assessing what they're reading and processing it is. And then, of course, if you have to compress it into a 1-minute video or whatever it is, I don't know what the limit is on TikTok anymore. Well, you might be getting distorted view of these things. But there's no convincing anybody at this point. You're not getting it from TikTok. You're getting it from us, and I better get to it if I'm going to share the bulk of the news with you. And it'll be a day, to say the least. We've got such a backlog as it is, and Trump is adding to it. And it's only Friday, the gateway to Crazy Town in the Trump era. We don't know what he's going to do with his weekends, though he has stayed mostly quiet while playing golf. It's the trips back and forth that cause issues. Anyway, I don't know if what I would say is the top story this morning. I guess we got two competing top stories. And one of them, we don't know what kind of a story it is. All right, here's that one. The New York Times reported yesterday, and we might as well just read the thing, even though, of course, by now, Trump has denied the whole thing and said that it was all made up by the failing New York Times. He's reacted very in very agitated fashion as usual, but his Truth Social post was mostly, it was a brief denial of the story and then a long attack on the various reporters involved in the story. This one, it's another one of these multiple bylines. Here's the story. New York Times headline: Pentagon set up briefing for Musk on potential war with China. And I think that headline may have changed over time. Let me see. No, there's that one. All right. Well, here we go. I think last evening, the headline was Musk set to get access to top secret U.S. plan for, and if you click on it, a potential war with China. This is the same story, but changed headline. And I think that's reflecting the denials from Trump, the White House, everybody. Let me see if these two articles side by side. Yeah, I guess they're the same articles because now the URL is the same, but the headline was changed. So I just by virtue of having posted it on Blue Sky last night, do I see the old headline? Anyway, the story currently reads as follows. The subheader here, the access would be a major expansion of Elon Musk's government role and highlight his conflicts of interest. Yes, among other things. And again, Elon Musk's government role. Remember also that in courtrooms around the country, they're denying that Elon Musk has any role, much less top secret military advisor roles. I mean, there's not been any hint anywhere that he had any sort of military capacity to his advisorship, whatever the hell it is that he's got. I mean, I think that everybody has agreed that he's been designated a special government employee, but that comes with all sorts of restrictions. And although they can have security clearance, and I guess you can have them in the not in the military chain of command, but in the Department of Defense doing some work, nothing prohibits that. But remember that, again, the limitations. I mean, they've made such a mockery of the idea of the special government employee thing. Recall that they are limited in time to working for 130 days, but they have worked around that by saying, oh, well, technically he's only working 1 day a week. So he's 130 weeks of this stuff coming to him, which, by the way, someone should address in court and get a ruling on that one. Because by the same token, just as he's been in court saying, I'm not in charge of Dodgy, and then the president gives the non-State of the Union address to a joint session of Congress and says, oh, yes, he is. And the judges are getting very frustrated with that. It is a stupid charade, and I don't know why they continue to try to pass it off. But I guess it's still freezing some judges in place. All right, we'll have an inquiry. It'll only take 15 minutes, but we'll have it, and we'll schedule it for a week from now, and it drags things out. Similarly, he's now, I'm both working 24/7, which is my superpower, and working only 1 day a week so that I can preserve my access to things I don't really have access to anyway. It's a bit of a mess. Anyway, I think this also kind of qualifies for a new category of news that I've been tracking, which is the normie alert. Just kind of thought about it yesterday about the idea of I should be labeling those things as normie alerts with a little trademark symbol. Things that happen in the course of any given day that will actually disturb the normies, people who are, even if they are tuned into the news, for whatever reason don't register the same objections that we do to every single story. The first one that occurred to me that way is unrelated, except that it involves a member of the military. But over at Arlington Cemetery, or rather at the Arlington Cemetery webpage, I guess, where they have all sorts of information for people interested in touring the grounds, et cetera, they have the listings of the grave sites, should you wish to visit, the grave sites of prominent Americans who are buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And arguably everybody who's buried in Arlington National Cemetery is a prominent American, but there are some more famous than others, and there's a guide to finding their grave sites. And one by one, people of any color whatsoever, or anybody who's just basically non-white, are finding that their listings are being erased from they're not finding because they're dead, but they're families, just general tourists interested in finding them, etc., are finding that they've been removed from it. And the latest was, among the latest, Colin Powell, removed from the list of prominent Americans buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And again, the excuse is the weird and very, very incorrect definition of DEI or DEIA, depending on who you're talking to and what day of the week it is, over at the Pentagon. Oh, we have to remove all the DEI from everything. And obviously, Colin Powell's grave is only being marked because somebody felt it was necessary to include a diverse set of prominent Americans in the list of grave sites here at Arlington. And clearly he only made the list because he's black, as opposed to having been the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It's a military cemetery. He's the highest ranking military officer of his time, and also was Secretary of State. But, minus all of those accomplishments, you're only putting him in here because, et cetera, et cetera. So it's gotten pretty crazy. So that was this. I only bring that up because I thought that was the first thing that made me say that's the sort of thing that would be a normie alert. People would say, "What, Colin Powell? I remember that guy." And it does leave a certain element of the American population sort of nakedly standing there looking at themselves, trying to decide what the hell's going on and where they stand in all of this, because admiration for Colin Powell and the job he did as Secretary of State and as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, while politically you may have disagreements with it, in the main, people widely recognized this is a prominent achievement by an African American or a Caribbean African American or however you designate, but a black American who's risen to the heights. And all right, he certainly handled the job no differently than anybody else would handle the job. I mean, he's really sort of I guess in a way, maybe he would agree with it if he were still alive, anti-DEI. I don't know. He seemed like a fairly open-minded, fair-minded person for a conservative. But he may very well have said, listen, I disagree with the idea of promoting people unfairly, but I don't believe that's happened to me. I think I've actually qualified my way into this job. Anyway, most people, I think, largely agreed that he handled the job competently, though they may have disagreed with him politically. And that if he's stripped of recognition and pointed to because DEI, and really he only did these things because of he was only recognized as prominent because of his race. If you're going to stand with the Republican Party and other conservatives in this decision, you really have to reevaluate how you evaluated Colin Powell, because you probably spent a good deal of your political adulthood saying, I feel pretty good about my support for and general good feeling about Colin Powell. That proves I'm not a racist because I haven't reduced the whole thing to his skin color. I have said, no. He has achieved remarkable things, and he happens to be black. That's and I'm okay with that, which is sort of like, well, that's a racist sort of thought to express to yourself. But yeah, it's better than segregationist thought. Let's say that. And but I think people are going to find, oh, well, if he's now out of favor because of his skin color, basically, if I'm going to stay on board with this conservative movement in this Republican Party, I have a problem with myself all of a sudden. I now recognize that I'll be facilitating some pretty backwards racism if I can't object to even this. So I don't know. I just thought it might be of interest in moving people, however slightly, from either their complacency with the Trump administration or the current conservative movement or whatever. Anyway, that wasn't the story I meant to start out telling you. This is the New York Times story. Pentagon set up briefing for Musk on potential war with China. This, too, the reason for the story on Colin Powell, a thing that I think will raise a normie alert. People say, wait a second. As it says here, the gist of the story is they're going to brief Elon Musk on what is the plan for how the military will handle a potential war with China, basically described as one of the highest, most important, most protected secrets in national security. Right? Nothing could be more worrisome than handing it out to somebody that you can't completely trust. And maybe Elon Musk is that kind of person, but also there's just no need to know. And it's the kind of thing that most people would laugh in your face. Can you give me the secret plans for war with China? Psh, I might not even tell Donald Trump about that. Yeah, and it's likely that they don't, by the way, if you read the article, which I promise you I will. But I think this, too, would make normies say, what the hell is this guy getting this information for? And, of course, the article describes 10,000 other reasons why he shouldn't be getting this information. Although they did make a guess as to why he might be, why it might be of interest to fill him in, at least in the broad strokes about what it is. I mean, it's reaching, but they do say it. Who says it? Eric Schmidt, Eric Lipton, Julian Barnes, Ryan Mack, and Maggie Haberman, who I think probably was the target of most of the hate in Trump's Truth Social post, although it might have been Eric Schmidt. I'm not sure. Anyway, I neglected to read the entire screed. We'll read this screed instead. The Pentagon was scheduled on Friday, and I think last night's dispatch was they are, but now it's just they were, scheduled on Friday to brief Elon Musk on the U.S. military's plan for any war that might break out with China, two U.S. officials said on Thursday. Another official said the briefing would be China-focused without providing additional details. A fourth official confirmed that Mr. Musk was going to be at the Pentagon on Friday, but offered no details. So it's very interesting, different levels of confirmation of the story that they have to parse like that. So two people said he's getting the war plans. One person said, well, he's coming to the Pentagon for a briefing on China in general, China-focused. But that's it. And the fourth official says he's coming to the Pentagon, but I can't tell you, what they're talking about. Now it breaks down further. Hours after the news of the planned meeting was published by the New York Times, Pentagon officials and President Trump denied that the session would be about military plans involving China. And then Trump goes further. China will not even be mentioned or discussed, Mr. Trump said in a late-night social media post. So you see where we've gone. He's coming to get the war plans with China. Well, he's coming for a briefing that's going to be China-focused. Well, he's coming for a briefing, but I can't tell you what it is going to be about. And then finally, well, he's coming for a briefing, but they won't even say the word China in it. It won't even be about, we won't even eat Chinese food. It's that non-China. Like, okay, that's clearly a that's clearly a fake denial. Anyway, it was not clear if the briefing for Mr. Musk would go ahead as originally planned. I mean, now I think it's probably better if he turns around and stays away. But providing Mr. Musk with access to some of the nation's most closely guarded military secrets, that's a good point, would be a dramatic expansion of his already extensive role as an advisor to Mr. Trump and leader of his effort to slash spending and purge the government of people and policies that they oppose. And that's a good reminder of exactly what his nebulous role in the American government, if you can even call it that, what it actually is. A good reminder of how broad it is, that he's an advisor to Mr. Trump and leader of his effort to slash spending and purge the government of people and policies they oppose. It's actually rather remarkable that Trump feels like he needs any help with that. It would also bring into sharp relief the questions about Mr. Musk's conflicts of interest as he ranges widely across the federal bureaucracy while continuing to run businesses that are major government contractors. Yes. In this case, Mr. Musk, the billionaire chief executive of both SpaceX and Tesla, is a leading supplier to the Pentagon and has extensive financial interests in China, as Trump would say it. Pentagon war plans, known in military jargon as O plans or operational plans, ooh, that's a new learning experience for us, are among the military's most closely guarded secrets. But whatever, how about this South African guy? Why not give it to him? If a foreign country were to learn how the this is a helpful explainer. I think you knew this, but if a foreign country were to learn how the United States planned to fight a war against them, it could reinforce its defenses and address its weaknesses, making the plans far less likely to succeed. It's a general truism. Thank you. If the opposing baseball team is able to steal your signals from the pitcher, well then, okay, you get the idea. The top secret briefing that exists for the China war plan has about 20 to 30 slides that lay out how the United States would fight such a conflict It covers the plan beginning with the indications and warnings of a threat from China to various options on what Chinese targets to hit, over what time period, that would be presented to Mr. Trump for decisions, according to officials with knowledge of the plan. The White House spokesman did not respond to an email seeking comment on the purpose of the visit, how it came about, whether Mr. Trump was aware of it even, and whether the visit raises questions of conflicts of interest. The White House has not said whether Mr. Trump signed a conflicts of interest waiver for Mr. Musk. And of course, that is paperwork, so you know what happened with that one. No, he didn't. The chief Pentagon spokesman, Sean Parnell, initially did not respond to a similar email seeking comment about why Mr. Musk was to receive a briefing on the China war plan. Soon after the Times published this article on Thursday evening, Mr. Parnell gave a short statement. The Defense Department is excited to welcome Elon Musk to the Pentagon on Friday, except he might turn around and not show up, in which case, you're liars. He's excited to welcome to the Pentagon on Friday. He was invited by Secretary Hegseth and is just visiting. So it's like, two sides of the same coin over there in Monopoly land. They had it right, more so than we thought. The division between in jail and just visiting is pretty close. It's a matter of perspective. Anyway, about an hour later, Mr. Parnell posted a message on his X account. Ready for this one? Okay, now the first question is it what's up? Is he coming to the Pentagon? Is he getting the China briefing? Well, we're excited to welcome him to the Pentagon on Friday. He was invited by the secretary, et cetera, et cetera. About an hour later on X, no, this is 100% fake news, just brazenly and maliciously wrong. Elon Musk is a patriot. That seems a superfluous inclusion. We are proud to have him at the Pentagon. So, yes, he's coming. No, he's not coming. Yes, he is. He's a patriot. He is coming to the Pentagon, but for other reasons. Having freedom fries with the secretary. What? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also commented on X late on Thursday evening, saying, this is not a meeting about top secret China war plans. It's an informal meeting about innovation and efficiencies and smarter production. It's going to be great. Okay. Roughly 30 minutes after that social media post, the Wall Street Journal confirmed that Mr. Musk had been scheduled to be briefed on the war planning for China. You know, the thing they said no to. What's really amazing about this is, and why it's such a normie alert in my opinion, is now at this point it's clear even Elon Musk and Donald Trump oppose the idea of briefing Elon Musk on war plans for China. I mean, if we oppose it and they oppose it, generally speaking, normies are going to oppose it too. It's just that we oppose it and they're lying about opposing it, and the fact that they aren't going to do it, they're going to do it. I mean, Elon Musk will sell the United States to Russia if they don't do it. Probably, I guess. I think he has that power now. In his own post on social media early Friday, Mr. Musk said he looked forward to the prosecutions of those at the Pentagon who are leaking maliciously false information to NYT, New York Times, of course. So I want you to know this briefing is not happening. It was never happening. It's a fake, and we're going to prosecute everybody who said that this thing that wasn't happening was happening. Yeah, I don't think so. And also, by the way, the leaker was pretty much everybody in the United States military. They probably all, top to bottom, wanted you nowhere near the China war plans. Whatever the meeting will now be about, the planning reflected the extraordinary dual role played by Mr. Musk, who is both the world's wealthiest man and has been given broad authority by Mr. Trump. So now supervising the most powerful military in the world as the world's wealthiest man. I think all that's missing at this point is the volcano lair, but maybe some sort of, who knows how close we are to the space laser portion of the program. He does, after all, have a bunch of satellites in orbit. Mr. Musk has a security clearance, which, he may have. Remember, we've discussed this on the program a number of times, that that's something that the president has the option to just issue without any sort of clearance or anybody's agreement anywhere in the national security community, nobody has to agree that he's actually trustworthy for the president to just say, poof, he's got security clearance because of the nature of security clearances, that by executive order existing well in advance of Trump's presidency, but I think descending from Eisenhower executive orders, the whole structure of security clearances basically comes down to anybody who gets one as essentially an extension of the president's power as commander-in-chief, chief law enforcement officer, etc. That he can basically say, if I trust him, you have to. Because otherwise, if you don't trust the person who's in charge of all this stuff, we're sunk. So Musk has a security clearance of some sort. And Hegseth can determine who has a need to know about the plan. And Hegseth is an idiot and drunkard, and of course is a vassal of Trump's. Trump wants him to have a briefing. Hegseth wants him to have a briefing. Hegseth wants him to have a briefing. He gets the briefing. Mr. Hegseth, Admiral Christopher W. Grady, the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Admiral Samuel J. Paparo, the head of the military's Indo-Pacific Command, were set to present Mr. Musk with details of the U.S. plan to counter China in the event of a military conflict between the two countries. That's just basically it. That's true. I'm going to have to boost the volume on this guy, too. I used to run this brake music at about, 30% power. I've boosted it back up. I'm going to have to run it at 100%. Here we go, 100%. Maybe a little bit too much. All right. Well, anyway, we'll be back with further details. This is a lengthy read, but I think well worth it, even for a Friday. Be right back.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I really can't tell whether everything needs to be boosted or not, but the break music sounded like it could use a little extra oomph, and checking all these other levels, I was actually just playing other sound effects during the break, things that are set to lower than 100% levels that used to really blast through, but I don't know. We'll see. We can test one or two of these things. Hey, who thinks that it's a good idea to brief Elon Musk on war plans with China? Top secret stuff.
Unacceptable!
Yeah, all right. Well, I agree. It is unacceptable. Although it sounds like you are less emphatic about it than you used to be. I don't know. So rerouting the sound in order to allow Greg to hear it is, I think, sort of, I don't know what to tell you. It's, I guess in rerouting the sound, it might have dampened it in some way. I really can't explain why that would be the case, but it appears to be. So what can I tell you? Anyway, it's just so long as we can continue. I think the voice is probably the more important part of all this stuff. And by the way, as this story is going on, Scott has sent other headlines about the same situation, just basically confirming that this is going on. It's not just New York Times coming up with this thing. Of course, we read right in the story here that the Wall Street Journal had confirmed the same thing, but Vox has a story on it. Elon, what their headline is, Elon Musk's extensive ties to China explained, which we probably should add to the mix, but I think the New York Times probably does a decent job in the top line information about that. Then in Axios, Trump suggests sending Tesla vandals to El Salvador prisons. That also happening in the background. But Elon Musk really using this episode to flex his muscle, such as it is, in asserting his control over everything. That now that they've gotten Trump to agree that Pam Bondi should get on board with declaring vandalizing Teslas to be domestic terrorism, you might as well throw in there that, oh yeah, by the way, I'm also going to suggest to the president that he send you to Supermax prison in El Salvador if you're suspected of keying a Tesla or something like that. Sure, why not? Why not just make Elon Musk dictator and get it over with? I don't know. I happen to see, by the way, the photo illustrating this New York Times piece is of Trump and Musk making their way, presumably to or from the Oval Office on the south, is it the south portico of the White House, but that Musk still has in tow his young son, who, has the wacky name, and I guess they call Little X or something like that when they drag him around. I am amazed that this little nose wiper is still allowed near Trump. Like, I thought that Oval Office episode where he was whispering to him, shut your mouth, and picking his nose and wiping it on the Resolute desk, such that we then later, a few days later, read a report that Trump sent the desk out for cleaning. Like, I thought he would say, all right, Elon, it's one thing that, you come in here and you're advising me, and I don't mind even sharing the spotlight, which is very rare for me. Very rare. Many people are saying it's very rare. But the kid has just got to go. But there's no stopping him. And I'm just curious, from a personal standpoint, whether Trump is like, I love it, he's such a cute little kid, he's very precocious, I actually enjoy him. Or is he like, I want that little monster out of here, but there's no telling this Musk guy anything. Nothing. He's not listening to me. I don't know. It's somewhere in between, I would guess, but I'm just fascinated by that aspect of things. Anyway, we left off by listing the names of the officials involved in the people who will be groveling before Elon Musk, presenting him with the nation's most closely guarded secrets. Pete Hegseth, Admirals Christopher Grady, the acting chairman. Oh, I'm sorry, the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Oh, you know what? I got a note here. The sound effect's still very low in my headphones. And let me see. What's running through the same volume meter? Soundboard, Firefox, WavePad. Okay, well, I don't use the two of them. So if I boosted this thing to like 3x overdrive, would that do the trick? Acting! It's a little louder. Do I need to have it 4x over? How loud can I make it with the volume thing? Let's see. Acting! That's not even super loud. But that might be too loud for the music and the breaks. I don't know. You want to test that for just a second? All right, we're not taking a break. Don't panic. But if I just press the break music now, that seems too loud, don't you think? All right. Well, we'll have to strike a balance. It was never all that loud, the acting thing. Anyway, so I don't know. What about now? What would the music sound like now? Still a little bit loud, but maybe I can turn the volume of those things down a little bit. All right. We'll find our way back to normalcy in all of this, but it'll be spread out over a couple of weeks as we experiment with different sound effects. I wanted to tell you a little more about giving away the nation's most closely guarded secrets to Elon Musk. So the two admirals, the one who's the Joint Chief of Staff, the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the head of the military's Indo-Pacific Command, both have to get on their knees and grovel to Trump and present him with the details of the U.S. plan to counter China in the event of a military conflict between the two countries. The meeting had been set to be held not in Mr. Hegseth's office, where an informal discussion about innovation, as he was claiming they were going to have, would most likely take place. But instead, for some strange reason, the informal conversation that might not even mention China, they're not even going to say the name of the country, which is a beautiful, beautiful country and deserves the most delicious chocolate cake. But they're going to be having that discussion in the tank. What's the tank? It's a secure conference room in the Pentagon, typically used for high-level meetings of members of the Joint Chiefs, their senior staff, and visiting combatant commanders. You know, like probably a skiff and buried in the, I don't know if it's in the basement or I don't know if it's above ground, who knows, but it's the super secure room where you would take people who are going to be discussing the most secret stuff. That's the reason you have a discussion in that room. Very secret things are happening, not because it's cool or it has the best, vending machines or anything like that. That's where you go for secrets. We're going to have an informal discussion. It's just going to take place in the most secure room we have for reasons. Operational plans for major contingencies like a war with China are extremely difficult for people without extensive military planning experience to understand. That's interesting. I mean, that's not terribly surprising, but it's interesting. The technical nature of these plans is why presidents, not just Trump, but most presidents, I guess, are typically presented with the broad contours of a plan rather than the actual details of documents. How many details Mr. Musk had wanted or expected to hear was unclear. So, you actually have the chairman, or the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, walking on eggshells. Am I going to satisfy or dissatisfy Mr. Musk? I wonder what sort of level of detail he wants. Mr. Hegseth received part of the China war plan briefing last week and another part on Wednesday, according to officials familiar with the plan. It was unclear what the impetus was for providing Mr. Musk with such a sensitive briefing. Where did this idea come from? He's not in the military chain of command, nor is he an official advisor to Trump on military matters involving China. That's interesting hedge there, too. Military matters. I would have thought he's not an advisor to Mr. Trump on military matters, period. But they had to add involving China. So, what sorts of military matters is he involved in? And maybe it was just as a prelude to this speculation that comes in the next paragraph. But there is a possible reason Mr. Musk might have needed to know aspects of the war plan. We're making it up, but, what would it be if we were trying to imagine it? If Mr. Musk and his team of cost cutters, that's an interesting way of labeling them, from the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, as we say, if they want to trim the Pentagon budget in a responsible way, would be the first thing they tried to do in a responsible way, they may need to know what weapons systems the Pentagon plans to use in a fight with China. Maybe. But by the way, there's been no evidence of their trying to do things in a responsible way elsewhere. If they wanted to know what sort of mechanisms they were using over at the Department of Health and Human Services to do essential services and things that they would even deem essential services, they would ask questions and get a briefing, but they didn't care. Their mode of operation was instead shut everything down, and as we learn what we actually wish we hadn't shut down, we'll start it up again, which is not the way things work in the real world. But again, they come from the computer world where shutting things off and turning them back on again is a thing that works. In fact, it's a thing that helps. Not so in the real world, not so in the military world. And by the way, along the way, we've seen them shut down the people who are transporting and guarding the actual nuclear warheads that run our country's nuclear defenses, on which our nuclear defenses depend, and shut it off mid-trip with no indication that they even had any idea what the hell the guys did, and then turn it back on again if necessary. And, so, maybe this would be a way to avoid repeating the mistakes that they've already made with our national defense. But there's also, the track record shows that they haven't been interested in it so far, so that maybe this is just speculation based on nothing. It wouldn't be hard to imagine, though, that they were like, well, we did learn a lesson. Maybe we shouldn't do it this way. So what do they mean? It doesn't help in terms of protecting the secrets, but did they have an attack of conscience and decide that they needed to do this in a more responsible way? So they would need to know, if we're going to cut the Pentagon budget, what are you going to use if you wanted to fight with China? And then we won't turn those things off, which is essentially just, okay, when China reads in the newspaper what has and hasn't been shut down, or at least what has been shut down. Then we might not discuss what hasn't been. They'll say, all right, now we have a pretty good idea of what they're going to come at us with in the war plan with China, because everything that they shut down, they're clearly not interested in using. So that's as good as giving them the plan at this point. But, because reasons, the rich guy has not realized this. Anyway, what would be an example of this idea? They give us an idea. They suggest something as an example. Take, for example, aircraft carriers. Take my aircraft carriers, please. Cutting back on future aircraft carriers would save billions of dollars. Maybe. Money that could be spent on, say, drones or other weaponry, right? If you wanted to change the focus of your offensive capabilities. But if the U.S. war strategy relies on using aircraft carriers in, let's say, innovative ways that would surprise China, then mothballing existing ships or stopping production on future ships could cripple that plan. And let's say you're interested in not crippling plans. Then you might plan things differently. That's the claim here. So maybe Musk needs to know the war plan so he doesn't accidentally turn parts of it off. At which point you basically come to the conclusion, by the way, does that mean that there's no deep state? I mean, could there be a clearer, indication that there isn't one and maybe never was a deep state? That if Elon Musk can say, elected to nothing, right? If he can say, let's turn off these parts of the Pentagon. And they say, but we need these for our top secret. This is our most important defense mechanisms. They're part of every plan. China defense, Russia defense. Oh, no, well, we're against that now. No more invading Ukraine, invading Canada, invading Greenland, invading Panama, invading Mexico, invading Gaza. We need it for all these things. I don't care. Elon Musk, I'm turning it off. If you need it, if it turns out we really need it, I'll turn it back on again later. And, oh, no, that doesn't work that way. You're really going to damage our plans. But you are Elon Musk. So I guess we'll turn it off. And then we'll lose the war. And then you'll be sorry. As opposed to, F you. I don't care what you say. That's not being turned off. Right? And that wouldn't even be a bad thing. And it wouldn't really even be necessarily indicative of there being such a thing as the deep state. That would be just that there are people in the military who know that these things are necessary and that it doesn't work this way and you can't turn it off and turn it back on again. And who cares? And this guy's not in my chain of command. He's not elected to anything. I'm not listening to him. It's not happening. Do not turn this off. Right? You don't have to have a deep state to believe in that. But if you did have a deep state, if there really was such a thing as a deep state, then it wouldn't make a difference what he says to turn off if it contradicts the war plans. It's not turning off. Not only that, but Elon Musk has suddenly had a closed casket style heart attack. Don't know how it happened. He was just, going along, enjoying his video games, and all of a sudden he died of natural causes, and the casket is closed, and also we don't know where the casket is, and a C-130 just took off from Andrews and is flying over the ocean. And I don't know, it came back without the payload it left with, which was a small box about 8 feet long. Anyway, there's no deep state if they can't prevent this sort of nonsense from happening, right? But too bad. It's part of the mythology and they're keeping it. So, planning for a war with China has dominated Pentagon thinking for decades. I think we all knew that. Well before a possible confrontation with Beijing became more conventional wisdom on Capitol Hill. That's just pointing out the military has always wanted, we could go to war with anybody at any time. We got war plans for everybody. While we're not having wars, why don't you guys spend your time planning for what if we did? And every day that I make jokes using the random country generator saying, what if we invaded XYZ country? And every one of them more ludicrous than the next. There are plans for a war in that country in case you need them. That's how they use the downtime in the military. But yes, they've been planning for a war with China forever just because it's a country and we had the time. The United States has built, though, its Air Forces, Navy, and Space Forces, don't forget them, and Poland, don't forget them, and even more recently its Marines and Army forces with a possible fight against China in mind. It's interesting that it's not more recently the Space Forces, but okay. Critics have said the military has invested too much in big, expensive items like fighter jets or aircraft carriers, weapons that we use to fight wars with. And, they say, spent too little in mid-range drones and coastal defenses. But for Mr. Musk, this is interesting. People have said that, and Mr. Musk is among them, presumably. Now, most people are saying it because they believe, rightly or wrongly, I think that this would be a more difficult war to defend for China if we fought it this way. But Musk has a slightly different take on things, or at least potentially does, right? For Mr. Musk to evaluate how to reorient Pentagon spending, he would want to know what the military intends to use and for what purpose. Wouldn't he, though? Everyone would love to know that, but for different reasons. Why would he be so interested? Well, first of all, a little more background. Mr. Musk has already called for the Pentagon to stop buying certain high-priced items because cost-cutting, like the F-35 fighter jets manufactured by one of his space launch competitors, Lockheed Martin. Why don't we stop? Well, I'm just cost-cutting. Let's just stop sending billions of dollars to my main competitor in space launch, Lockheed Martin, so that they go under and I get all their contracts. For American prosperity. That's what I mean. Yeah. Well, anyway, so he's called for them to stop buying F-35s in a program that costs the Pentagon more than $12 billion a year. Yet Mr. Musk's extensive business interests make any access to strategic secrets about China a serious problem in the view of ethics experts. But who cares about ethics? Officials have said revisions to the war plans against China have focused on upgrading the plans for defending against space warfare. Probably a good idea in its own right, but questionable when it's driven by the guy with the space company, right? China has developed a suite of weapons that can attack U.S. satellites. Mr. Musk has U.S. satellites. In fact, the next paragraph reads Mr. Musk's constellation of low Earth orbit Starlink satellites, which provide data and communication services from space, are considered more resilient than traditional satellites, but he could have an interest in learning about whether or not the United States could defend his satellites in a war with China. Wouldn't that be something? If a private company were able to force the United States government to be all about defending their private assets. Participating in a classified briefing on the China threat with some of the most senior Pentagon and U.S. military officials would be a tremendously valuable opportunity for any defense contractor seeking to sell services to the military. What do you guys need for your most worrisome war? Okay. I don't know if you know this, but my engineers in about 2 weeks will learn that they need to start working on exactly this problem immediately, but only because we've been so prescient. Mr. Musk, in fact, could gain insight into new tools that the Pentagon might need, and that SpaceX, where he remains chief executive, could, manufacture and sell, let's say. Contractors working on relevant Pentagon projects generally do have access to certain limited war planning documents, but only once war plans are approved, said Todd Harrison, a senior fellow at American Enterprise Institute, where he focuses on defense strategy. Individual executives rarely, if ever, get exclusive access to top Pentagon officials for such a sensitive briefing, Mr. Harrison said. Musk at a war planning briefing, he said, giving the CEO of one defense company, and that's what you need to remember about Musk. He's not just a rich billionaire, the richest man in the world, head of Twitter, head of Tesla, even head of SpaceX. So it's a good point that we're talking about giving the CEO of one defense company unique access. Seems like this could be grounds for a contract protest and is a real conflict of interest. I mean, beyond giving him an unfair advantage just in general and everybody understanding that, you should understand that this means that other defense contractors, and I think you've probably heard there are a number of defense contractors out there. It's actually a pretty lucrative business, and they kind of have billions of dollars at stake and more or less are suspected of being willing to do almost anything to make sure that those things continue. You remember the whole warning about the military-industrial complex, et cetera, that it was a big deal, that it might unfortunately overcome our political control of our own military one day? Yeah. Well, what if the military-industrial complex was reduced to one person who was both military and industrial, and used that power to make sure that the complex was reduced to one monopoly organization headed by somebody who was both, all three things: the richest man in the world, in control of the government, and in control, and the military that goes along with it, and in control of the industrial portion of that complex. Would that be a problem? Can we all just shake our head in agreement here? Yes. So, but in addition to all of that, to the extent that the rest of the military-industrial complex still exists, that there are other competitors, other defense contractors out there, understand that under the normal system where, there's a rule of law and courts can decide things, et cetera, if a contract is put out to bid and someone is awarded the contract and other bidders in the process get wind of the fact that the winning contractor had some sort of strange, unexplained insider advantage and won the contract that way, essentially by cheating, they can dispute the award of the contract. Because remember, this is supposed to be an actual open competition, not an insider track, and they would sue. And normally the courts would say, we're courts, we'll hear the evidence, there isn't any one contractor that has control of the government and its courts and its legal system and everything else. So we can weigh and evaluate the situation and come up with a reasonably objective view of what actually happened here. And if it turns out that they had an unfair advantage, we can void the contract and have them either put it out to bid again or whatever. But what if no? What if the guy who won the contract owns the court as well? Well, that's an unusual circumstance, but it is worth pointing out that in normal times you'd be able to contest all of these contracts and the way that they were awarded, and that would cause all sorts of problems, including delaying the production of these things that are supposedly essential to defense against China. Anyway, Mr. Musk's SpaceX is already being paid billions of dollars by the Pentagon and federal spy agencies as well to help the United States build new military satellite networks to try to confront rising military threats from China. SpaceX launches most of these military satellites for the Pentagon on its Falcon 9 rockets, which take off from launch pads that SpaceX has set up at military bases in Florida and California. The company separately has been paid hundreds of millions of dollars by the Pentagon that now relies heavily on SpaceX's Starlink satellite communications network for military personnel to transmit data worldwide. And I understand data to be an important thing these days. In 2024, SpaceX was granted about $1.6 billion in Air Force contracts. That does not include classified spending with SpaceX by the National Reconnaissance Office, which has hired the company to build it a new constellation of low Earth orbit satellites to spy on China and Russia and other threats. But I think they'll probably cut costs by stop spying on Russia. Mr. Trump has already proposed that the United States build a new system that the military is calling, because Trump, Golden Dome, like Iron Dome in Israel, but in America it's a Golden Dome because Trump. It's a space-based missile defense system that recalls, for many of you, what President Ronald Reagan tried to deliver. The so-called Star Wars system Mr. Reagan had in mind was never fully developed. And I think the most salient objection at the time was that even if you had a 99.9% effective Star Wars system, there were just so many nuclear warheads being lobbed back and forth that it was essentially useless anyway. The 0.1% of warheads that were missed would still be enough to destroy everybody on the planet, and not worth the expense. But this time, somehow, it will be, because this time the guy who builds the satellites is the President of the United States. Perceived missile threats from China, be it nuclear weapons or hypersonic missiles or cruise missiles, are a major factor that led Mr. Trump to sign an executive order recently instructing the Pentagon to start work on Golden Dome. Even starting to plan and build the first components of the system will cost tens of billions of dollars, according to Pentagon officials, and most likely create large business opportunities for SpaceX, which already provides rocket launches, satellite structures, and space-based data communication systems, all of which will be required for Golden Dome. So in other words, Trump's biggest military priority is just something that sets up perfectly as a business opportunity for Elon. And as they, again, just to stress this again, even starting to plan for competing for these contracts will cost a company tens of billions of dollars. They're going to want whatever inside intelligence they can get about the likelihood of this being the real direction. Do we spend the tens of billions of dollars getting ourselves in a position to bid credibly on these contracts? Yes or no? First question you'd want to know is, well, are we going to build these things? Is the Pentagon going to buy these things? If so, let's invest. So certainly Musk gets advance warning on that. But now other companies are in the position of saying, well, should we prepare ourselves to bid, or are we just out of the bidding because this is automatically a lock for Elon Musk's companies? I don't know. And what kind of spending will that take out of the economy? Lots of jobs not being created all of a sudden by defense contractors who say it's probably hopeless for us to compete for these contracts anyway. So let's not put the tens of billions of dollars into it. Let's not hire all these experts to try to get ready for it. All right. One more paragraph before we exit on this. And I know it's all we've been talking about, but it's a big story. Separately, Mr. Musk has been the focus of an investigation by the Pentagon's Inspector General over questions about his compliance with his top secret security clearance. Isn't that interesting? Wouldn't you, if you were Elon Musk, like to get that guy in a secret room where nobody could hear you scream? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I know we're still in the middle of this long read, and that's what Fridays do. It's going to drive Scott crazy trying to summarize things, but we'll still give you a list of articles that you should read over the weekend. We can still do that. But interesting point here on the way out the door. Maybe we faded into the music, maybe not. Separately, Mr. Musk has been the focus of an investigation by the Pentagon's Inspector General. They still have one. Over questions about his compliance with his top secret security clearance. And as I said, well, what might be interesting while you're there, if you're going to be in a secret room where no one can hear you scream, to get yourself some FaceTime with the guy who's investigating you and try and settle the issue one way or another. But it is an interesting issue all by itself, right? If you did nothing to earn your security clearance, and there is little to no possibility that the President of the United States will revoke your security clearance, what motivation have you to comply with the strictures of your security clearance? What's going on? The investigation started last year after some SpaceX employees complained to government agencies that Mr. Musk and others at SpaceX were not properly reporting contacts or conversations with foreign leaders, as one might be expected to do if one was of top secret security clearance. I happen to have telephone calls all the time with the president of Russia, with the president of China, with various other world leaders with whom I'm conducting business. But don't ask me about those things, you security clearance guys. Air Force officials, before the end of the Biden administration, started their own review after Senate Democrats asked questions. How dare they? Asked questions about Mr. Musk and asserted that he was not complying with security clearance requirements. This is the security clearance he had even before Trump became president the second time. He's a security contractor. He's going to have certain clearances and probably done the right way, too. But now the top secret security clearance that he's going to need to get this briefing can just be granted by President Trump. But apparently nobody who's set to brief him particularly trusts him, and everybody knows that he didn't earn the security clearance the way you're supposed to. The Air Force, in fact, had denied a request by Mr. Musk for an even higher level of security clearance than what he used to have, known as Special Access Program. I don't know how they stress that, but I guess probably Special Access Program clearance is what they would call it. I don't know, probably abbreviated SAP, I don't know, which is reserved for extremely sensitive classified programs, citing potential security risks associated with the billionaire. He's got conflicts of interest. He's whatever. I don't know. He's not a natural born citizen of the United States, and his citizenship might be highly questionable. And after all, he overstayed his student visa after it should have expired when he dropped out. And, somebody like that, maybe you don't give security clearance to, the Air Force says. Just, as a matter of course. But now, of course, all of that is wiped out. In fact, SpaceX has become so valuable to the Pentagon that the Chinese government has said that it considers the company to be an extension of the U.S. military. Isn't that something? Starlink militarization and its impact on global strategic stability was the headline of one publication released last year from China's National University of Defense Technology, according to a translation of the paper prepared by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Musk and Tesla, an electric vehicle company he controls, that's a good way of putting it. Everybody kind of knows Elon Musk, Tesla, but good point, sort of subtly saying not that he founded, not that he invented the battery that's inside of it or anything like that. It's just an electric vehicle company that he came to control with money, are heavily reliant on China, which houses one of the automaker's flagship factories in Shanghai. Unveiled in 2019, the state-of-the-art facility was built with special permission from the Chinese government and now accounts for more than half of Tesla's global deliveries, even though the demand for its global deliveries is plummeting every day, but there you have it. Last year, the company said in financial filings that it had a $2.8 billion loan agreement with lenders in China, themselves controlled by the Chinese government, of course, for production expenditures. In other words, of the vast majority of his paper wealth depends on the cooperation of the Chinese government. And he's also about to go get a briefing on what are the plans for war with China for the United States, and the Chinese would be very interested in finding that out and could make life less pleasant for him if he didn't tell them, and that's kind of an issue. Normally, something we would pay attention to and say, don't give that guy the war plans. Now, it may not be giving him the real war plans, but don't even make it look like you're giving him the war plans. That would be the best bet. In public, Mr. Musk has avoided criticizing Beijing and signaled his willingness to work with the Chinese Communist Party. And remember that the Republican Party that he's now ostensibly the head of, despite the fact that he has to go through Donald Trump to do it, there's no bigger boogeyman, perhaps, well, I guess now Tren de Aragua is, than the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. They even have their own little, lingo abbreviation for it. In 2022, Musk wrote a column for the magazine of the Cyberspace Administration of China. Yes, not ours, theirs. The country's censorship agency, as it turns out, trumpeting his companies and their missions of improving humanity, which, highly questionable. That same year, the billionaire told the Financial Times that China should be given some control over Taiwan by making a special administrative zone for Taiwan that is reasonably palatable. I don't believe that there is any way to do that, but he says, well, how about if we gave China control over Taiwan in a way that Taiwan would be okay with? Well, yeah, how about if we did? And how about if there was magic flying pizza? Yeah, sure, why not? Well, anyway, that was an assertion that angered politicians of the independent island, as you might imagine it would. In that same interview, he also noted that Beijing sought assurances that he would not sell Starlink in China. That's the censorship arm of their, we don't want the Chinese populace able to get the international version of the internet, only the censored version that we allow here. Anyway, the following year at a tech conference, Mr. Musk called the democratic island, Taiwan, an integral part of China that is arbitrarily not part of China, and compared the Taiwan-China situation to Hawaii and the United States. That's about as closely as anybody has ever, outside of the structure of the Chinese Communist Party, has ever espoused the line of the Chinese Communist Party. It's not the American position, generally speaking, but who knows what it is now, because now Trump decides what that's going to be. On X, the social platform that he owns, Mr. Musk has long used his account to praise China. He wants to be able to operate there. He has said the country is by far, quote, by far, the world leader in electric vehicles and solar power, and has commended its space program for being, quote, far more advanced than people realize, unquote. This is him trying to get a contract with them, I guess. He has encouraged more people to visit the country and posited openly about an inevitable, that's a quote, inevitable Russia-China alliance. And given that we're already apparently in a Russia alliance, well, that would automatically bring us into a Russia-China alliance as well. So, some surprising angles on a surprising headline. Now that we've reached the end of the story, you had to hear the whole thing, I think. And now we can move on to a couple of other subjects, although, again, there's sort of more to add to this subject. I'll repeat for you again the names of the articles. I don't think we're going to get a chance to read them that Scott sent on. Vox has a Vox explainer. That's what Vox does. Entitled, let me open it up. The Elon Musk's extensive ties to China explained. His business empire needs the Chinese government, and that could warp American policy, says Joshua Keating over at Vox. And now we're seeing just kind of what kind of warping it results in. Elon Musk's business empire needs the Chinese government, and today he may or may not be getting a briefing on how America plans to fight any war that might occur with China. And I just think that the Chinese might be interested in it. And given the way Trump has operated the federal government here, I don't think that they will need much. I don't think it'll take much innovation at this point for the Chinese to say, well, if you want to continue to enjoy your business relationship with the Chinese government here, there's a price. And we just heard that you came into some interesting information, and we think you should share it with us. I don't know. I don't know how he'll handle that. But I'm sure he's a business genius, and he'll come up with a great deal that he can offer China. Of course, also offered here was from Politico Europe. Elon Musk threatens Pentagon leakers after New York Times report on secret China war briefing. That wasn't the one that Scott sent me, but there was one I put aside along with the ranting. I didn't find and put aside, but you really need to see it. The actual Truth Social post from Trump denying everything. I just thought the escalating denials, as outlined in the New York Times piece, really did enough for that one. So now Elon Musk is saying, by the way, there's going to be a manhunt for who leaked the information that I was going to be spying for China. And we don't really know. Yeah, but the other thing that Scott did send in my way was an Axios piece about the escalating use of domestic terrorism labels and all the laws that can trigger, using it on behalf of Tesla. As people are protesting Tesla dealerships, etc. And of course, some people taking things that much further into their own hands and destroying, vandalizing, damaging, whatever, Tesla property or private property, Teslas owned by individuals, but they're vandalizing Cybertrucks in particular. But I guess now any Tesla, which is too bad because a lot of people did, in fact, buy those Teslas, as the stickers, the bumper stickers now say, I bought this before Elon went crazy, even though he was always crazy. But you get the idea. And And I feel bad for somebody who may have, really broken the bank way back when to buy a Tesla to be a part of the electric vehicle revolution, only to find out that, the thing they may have sacrificed a great deal to get their hands on this electric vehicle, the whole thing it's getting spray painted, damaged, threatened, windows broken. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that's actually happening to, Tesla sedan owners. I think the Cybertrucks are unique in that. I mean, they stand out so much. I could see that. And of course, that was an overt project of the already, by that point, very crazy Elon Musk. But anyway, you get the idea. But Tesla dealerships being protested all the time. Tesla superchargers apparently in isolated incidents, being damaged as well. Also, lots of, confused and misinformation being circulated as well. Pictures of Tesla sedans on fire in a parking lot somewhere, but then it turns out, it's bad that they're on fire. They really were on fire, but they were on fire like a year ago or something, but it's now being recirculated as new news. Anyway, but now they got the Department of Justice in on the act saying we're going to find, they've identified, I think, 3 incidents of vandalism and found the people responsible for them and are going to put them on federal trial to try to make an example of them. We'll see how much further it goes. But this Axios piece, Trump suggests sending Tesla vandals to El Salvador prisons. Because why not? You want to hear a little bit about that one? Because that's a pretty major escalation of things. President Trump on Friday suggested sending anti-Tesla protesters to a notorious prison in El Salvador if convicted. This time he's actually waiting for a conviction on all of that. But remember that just like 12 hours ago, this treatment was only for members of the notorious international Tren de Aragua gang, except for whether or not people were really in the gang that they were punishing. But that was supposed to be the story. But we're skipping over all the rest of the body of criminal law and the 2 things you can get sent to El Salvador for: being a member of this terrible, terrible, very frightening sounding international gang, or being a person who stands near a Tesla dealership and says, I don't like Elon Musk. Whatever. Why it matters? You know how they love to do this over at Axios. Trump has put the full weight of the U.S. government behind defending and promoting First Buddy, Elon Musk's car company, which has seen both its sales and stock price slump. Reminder here, they had the sales event on the White House South Lawn in which Trump allegedly bought a Tesla and talked about how he allegedly bought one previously for his granddaughter. You remember all of that. But in the meantime, also, I think Trump officials, cabinet members, etc., have been on TV saying that the patriotic thing to do is for everybody to go out and buy stock in Tesla, which is also an unprecedented and ridiculous promotion. And probably the dumbest sounding thing since Kellyanne Conway went on TV to tell everybody to buy items from Ivanka Trump's fashion line. Here's an entry I hadn't seen before. Catch up quick. Another one of their bullet points. After promising to treat property crime targeting Tesla vehicles and facilities as domestic terrorism, Trump's Justice Department charged 3 people on Thursday with using Molotov cocktails to incinerate cars and showrooms. And by the way, I think that those people should be commended for promoting our relations with Russia, which is obviously in the interest of the current administration. Molotov cocktails, a Russian invention, and they should be very happy about that. But in the meantime, property in the United States is damaged. Elon Musk is very, very rich. So it doesn't matter what happens with Russia. We need to placate the rich guy. Some bullet points. Officials have alleged the incidents were tied to the Tesla takedown movement. That's a hashtag movement for you, which has targeted Musk's signature company amid a backlash to his role in Dodgy. Those charged face anywhere from 5 to 20 years in prison if convicted, the DOJ says. What they're saying? I look forward to watching the sick... Oh, is this Trump, maybe? Yeah, okay. I look forward to watching the sick terrorist thugs get 20-year jail sentences for what they're doing to Elon Musk and Tesla. Perhaps they could serve them in the prisons of El Salvador, which have become so recently famous for such lovely conditions, Trump wrote in a Truth Social post on Friday morning because he takes things so seriously. Between the lines, The U.S. recently struck that deal with the government of El Salvador to ship deported migrants to the country, where many are being confined in the controversial CECOT, it's a CECOT, an anti-terrorism prison. But, of course, domestically in El Salvador, it's an anti-gang prison. But now they term the two things, gang membership and terrorism, the same. In court filings, Human Rights Watch has alleged widespread abuses at that facility, including a lack of access to food and health care. What to watch? Whether the Trump administration actually pushes to send citizens, American citizens convicted of crimes, to foreign prisons. I think that's going to be a big normie talking point too. Maybe a bit of a pitchfork and torch situation as well. Legal advocates argue sending U.S. citizens to serve prison terms in El Salvador would violate the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. But, F the Constitution. There could also be tensions with the First Step Act that Trump signed in 2018, which mandates that prisoners, to the extent possible, there's lots of extent possible in Trump documents, be incarcerated within 500 driving miles of where they normally live, so family can visit them. But putting them in El Salvador, that's, there's a conflict with a bill that he signed once. Oh, no, I bet that'll stop him. Anyway, other stories, maybe the other big story of the day. I chose The Guardian to cover this one because just to, mix it up a little bit here. Trump rescinds executive order after law firm agrees to provide $40 million in free services. Another Trump shakedown. What are we talking about here? It's the Paul, Weiss firm. One of the targets of, he's done like 2 of these things, maybe more. Executive orders recently targeting law firms where members, partners, what have you, where attorneys from the law firms helped prosecute cases against him or to sue him in civil court or whatever, or where, in one case, where they offered to defend Jack Smith in Trump's pursuit of him across, across administrations in an attempt to criminalize what Jack Smith was doing, which was, of course, an attempt to actually hold Donald Trump accountable for his own crimes. You get the idea. But then this second one went after another such law firm, and the law firm, at least for now, appears to have agreed to knuckle under in much the same way that some of the media companies that Trump sued for ungodly amounts of money have agreed to knuckle under. What's going on? Again, The Guardian. Trump rescinds executive order after law firm agrees to provide $40 million in free services. Subheader. U.S. President reverses threat to suspend security clearances and cancel federal contracts after a meeting with chair of Paul Weiss. This a Associated Press wire piece that has been, I guess, in some way enhanced by various members of the Guardian staff. There's no individual byline on this one. Donald Trump rescinded an executive order targeting a prominent Democratic-leaning law firm after it agreed to provide $40 million in free legal services to support his administration's goals. They already have a Department of Justice for that, but now $40 million in extra legal services, which, if they really wanted to play games about it, first of all, they could say, yeah, we'll start helping you in 2 weeks. Or they could say, all right, you got $40 million in free legal services. By the way, we bill $40 million an hour, just so you know. Oh, look, we're done. I don't know. I don't know that they're going to play such games or they're going to knuckle under, but it's got people worried. The White House has targeted law firms whose lawyers have provided legal work that Trump disagrees with. Last week, he issued an order threatening to suspend active security clearances of attorneys at Paul Weiss and to terminate any federal contracts the firm has, though, as I understood it, it was unclear whether they had any. But the president suddenly reversed course following a meeting between Trump and Brad Karp, spelled with a K, at the beginning, as you might have guessed, the chair of the law firm Paul Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton, and Garrison, over the White House order. Trump's order singled out the work of Mark Pomerantz, who previously worked at the firm and who oversaw an investigation by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office into Trump's finances before Trump became president. You might recall that he was actually convicted in that case on 34 counts. Pomerantz once likened the president to a mob boss, as many of us have. To avoid the consequences of Trump's order, the White House said the firm had agreed to, quote, take on a wide range of pro bono matters that represent the full spectrum of political viewpoints of our society. How interesting that they wish for DEI in that case. These guys should take on a diverse spectrum of pro bono matters, and specifically $40 million worth of hours. The firm, OURS, hours. The firm reportedly agreed to disavow the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion considerations. Isn't it interesting? Even though that they're doing that now, they're just including Trump administration in their pro bono work. But yes, disavow the diversity, equity, and inclusion considerations in its hiring and promotions decisions, and dedicate the equivalent of $40 million in free legal services to support Trump administration policies on issues including assistance for veterans and countering anti-Semitism. In other words, shipping pro-Palestinian protesters to, other countries, or snatching them off the streets. Defending that practice to the tune of $40 million. The firm, the White House claimed, also acknowledged the wrongdoing of Pomerantz, the partner involved in the investigation into Trump's hush money payments to an adult film actor. It was unclear whether Karp was aware of that claim. That may have just been something they posted on Truth Social and said that the firm agreed to. But they might have agreed to it. The wrongdoing, of course, wasn't any. And he was right. And Trump was convicted 34 times for it. But, it's wrongdoing in his view. In a statement issued by the White House, Karp said, "We are gratified that the president has agreed to withdraw the executive order concerning Paul Weiss. We look forward to an engaged and constructive relationship with the president and his administration." The firm becomes the latest corporate target to make concessions to the president to avoid his ire. Meta and ABC made settlement payments to Trump's future presidential library to end lawsuits filed by Trump. Other tech and financial firms have publicly rolled back DEI programs in line with Trump's policy interests. Earlier executive orders have targeted the law firms of Perkins Coie, which last week sued in federal court in Washington, and Covington and Burling. So a wide range of responses to these targeting executive orders. This one disappointing, of course, to almost everyone, and lots of good writing about how damaging it is to our legal system, to the legal profession, to the firm itself, to the firm's clients. Like, do you want to be represented by the law firm that sometimes decides to switch sides, like the security contractors over at USIP? Probably not. Going to be some problems for all that. By the way, let's see another story that's circulating now that people will find familiar but ironic. From The Hill, Brett Samuels writes, Trump calls for a stop to nationwide injunctions amid court setbacks. He's been losing a lot of court cases and a lot of federal district judges imposing a nationwide injunction. And I mean, it makes sense given that these are of course national policies. It doesn't make any sense to say, well, in my district of my state, this will no longer be operative, but in 49 other states, it still will be. But it's also something you'll recognize from the previous administration. Trump people couldn't wait to sue and ask for nationwide injunctions from Matthew Kaczmarek in Texas, and they celebrated the idea of individual district judges being able to change national policy when the president was Biden. Now that the president is Trump, we need to end that practice, apparently. President Trump on Thursday called for a stop to nationwide injunctions and suggested the Supreme Court should intervene as his administration has faced multiple setbacks from federal judges. Unlawful nationwide injunctions, nothing unlawful about them, by radical left judges could very well lead to the destruction of our country. Trump posted on Truth Social, even though it wasn't true. These people are lunatics who do not care even a little bit about the repercussions from their very dangerous and incorrect decisions and rulings. Trump said it was an obligation of law-abiding agencies of government to have these orders overturned. Trump went on to complain that judges want to assume the powers of the presidency without getting elected. Experts have noted that judges are not elected so that they do not face political pressure in their rulings. Stop nationwide injunctions now before it's too late, Trump wrote on Truth Social. And there's more. It's complaining. It's whining. I just wanted to let you know. I think we've got the gist of it. We'll shift gears after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I've rediscovered another volume control out here that I can boost the volume of the entire soundboard. Before I was boosting the sound as collected by my, I don't know what you would call it, my sound routing app, Loopback. And I was boosting how loud the volume control was in Loopback, but I can also boost it directly on soundboard. So there's lots of opportunities to turn things up again and find the balance that we're used to. But all right. I was reading to you from The Hill, who is the author of this piece, Brett Samuels, about Trump's latest, one of his latest ragings, this time against nationwide injunctions, which makes no sense whatsoever. It's a basic function of federal courts. It's been around since forever, and of course they exploited it extensively during the Biden administration. But in case you were wondering, what has happened lately that would trigger his anger about this? It does say the Trump administration has faced a slew of injunctions from federal judges pausing aspects of its agenda. James Boasberg, the chief judge for the U.S. District Court of the District of Columbia, issued an order last weekend halting the deportation of a group of Venezuelans, including alleged members of the Tren de Aragua gang, to El Salvador. By the way, this reminds me, I know that yesterday I had some confusion about his having been appointed by George W. Bush but elevated by Obama. But what do we mean by elevated if he isn't serving on the D.C. circuit? What was he elevated to? There's the answer implicitly in this, that he's the chief judge of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. So he's still a federal district judge, not an appeals court judge. The elevation then was probably this. I guess I would infer from that, George W. Bush named him to be one of the district court judges for the District of Columbia. But it was his elevation to chief judge that probably came from Obama. And we could check Wikipedia on that, but I just thought that would help clear things up from yesterday. But in addition to what Boasberg has done here, and I have some more news to share about Boasberg, Trump in a separate post on Thursday attacked Boasberg, calling him a grandstander. Another federal judge, meanwhile, on Tuesday blocked Trump's executive order banning transgender people from serving in the military. Another federal judge recently ordered that the Departments of Agriculture, Defense, Energy, Interior, Treasury, and Veterans Affairs must immediately reinstate probationary employees who were fired. And again, you can see here's a place where the raging against nationwide injunctions as a concept is so ridiculous. What sense would it make to say that probationary employees who are fired from, these 6 cabinet level departments should be reinstated, but only within the confines of the district where I work? That doesn't make any sense. The employees are in the exact same situation, entitled to the exact same rights, no matter where in the country they work. It makes sense here. Sometimes you might say, well, maybe it's dumb for there to be a nationwide injunction in certain cases. But here, how federal employees from several different departments, no matter where they are in the United States, are treated with respect to their relationship with the federal government, it makes every bit of sense in the world to say the policy should be the same nationally. There's more. Earlier this month, U.S. District Judge John McConnell ruled to extend an injunction against the Trump administration's attempt to freeze payments for federal grants. That doesn't stop Josh Hawley from being dumb about it. He has introduced, or said he will, introduce legislation to curb what he called a dramatic abuse of judicial authority by courts that have issued injunctions against Trump. And of course, Trump considers the fact that they were stopping him a usurpation of presidential powers. It's not. It's an exercise of judicial powers. And to ban nationwide injunctions or impeach or threaten to impeach the judges who are doing this is a usurpation of judicial power. But never mind all that. You're never going to convince him that he doesn't know what he's talking about. So on to other news. Somewhere in here is the news I meant to share with you about Judge Boasberg. I'm going to have to dig it up, and I don't know whether it's framed in a Blue Sky post, I think. So it's going to take me some time to identify which one it is, though I may also have an article about it. But basically, the issue was, here we are, Southpaw posted this some days ago in response to Caroline Leavitt, the spokesperson for the White House, saying about Judge Boasberg, this judge is a Democrat activist. He was appointed by Barack Obama, which that was what we were just talking about, clearing that up. Reporter saying, well, he's originally appointed by George W. Bush and elevated by Obama. I feel I should clear that up. That didn't satisfy the White House, of course, but now we know how that could have happened. But more to the point, the first part of her statement, this judge is a Democrat activist, in addition to having been appointed first by George W. Bush, if that doesn't convince you, Southpaw points out, in recent years, Judge Boasberg has, 1, ordered the release of Hillary's emails. That would be a big win in Trump world, right? Ensured Trump's tax returns never became public. He certainly fought tooth and nail to make sure that wouldn't happen. But in case you were wondering, who's the federal judge that ended up blocking Trump's tax returns from reaching the public? James Boasberg, the Democrat activist. 3, I didn't number that second one, but 3, restricted disclosure from the Mueller investigation. That'd have to be considered a big win for Trump. 4, limited disclosure of grand jury materials in the Trump classified documents case, right? So Southpaw correctly, I think, reaches the conclusion, the resistance, he ain't. Yeah, that's no Democrat activist, as they put it there. And I think I have that in article form somewhere, but, just in an attempt to cover more bases, we'll probably move on from there. Let's see. Other things that I need to share with you are, let's see. What are the other Blue Sky post that I opened, and I said, oh, yeah, that does sound interesting. What's this one? Oh, yeah, right. This an interesting headline from the New York Times, story we haven't read yet. The headline here, though, is Musk donates to GOP members of Congress who support impeaching judges. You've heard those threats. And we've also heard the background threats all along that, Elon Musk will use his money to primary anybody that doesn't fall into line with Trump and to support people who do fall into line with Trump. Here's an obvious example of it, but an interesting observation, I think everybody figured this out inherently, but it was well stated by Maya Sen, a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, whose job probably will end up being eliminated at some point because there's no government anymore. But anyway, she could move over to the history department, I guess. The fact that the world's richest man, she says, works at the behest of the executive and can buy out the legislature is massively outside the scope of what the framers could have imagined. There is simply no constitutional measure that can guard against something like this. It's well put. It's well worth reading the article. I'll give you the clip here, the post from Blue Sky. It has the link. You can read both. I recommend it. And consider it alongside my own, garbled off-the-cuff formulation of it, to the extent that you find yourself hearkening back to the warning against the growth of the military-industrial complex and its relationship with government. What might you make of, or what might President Eisenhower, have made of somebody who sits at the head of government and by virtue of sitting at the head of government claims to be sitting at the head of the military and at the head of the industrial side of that complex? I think he probably would have raised an alarm. He might also have raised an alarm, for instance, on another story we still haven't gotten to, and I don't even think I have it parked somewhere, but in addition to keep continually threatening to withdraw the United States from NATO, the functional, precursor to this is that Trump is considering not appointing an American to head the NATO command over in Europe, something that has been in place since the end of World War II. The United States has just sort of traditionally sat atop the NATO alliance. If we're going to leave it, then I guess it makes some sense, or we might find that the rest of NATO objects to having an American general in charge if we keep threatening to leave the thing. But that was Eisenhower's original, since Eisenhower sat at the perch of Supreme Allied Commander during World War II, an American has occupied that office or its equivalent ever since, but no longer. Maybe also of some interest that it was the same man who warned about the growth of the military-industrial complex. Okay, so let's see. Other stories that we might need to try and get on the record. I'll read a bit of this one, also going back to the New York Times. Don't hate me, but there's still an outlet publishing lots of. We may disagree with the way they phrase it or approach it, but important news nonetheless. Here's a headline that'll grab your attention. Administration officials believe, they believe it. Administration officials believe an executive order, lets immigration agents enter homes without warrants. Not only do you get shipped off to prison in El Salvador with no due process, but they don't even have to have any due process to start the process. It remains unclear, says the subheader, whether the Trump administration will apply the law in this way, but such an interpretation, experts say, would infringe on basic civil liberties. You know who else says it? People who are not experts, who understand you can't enter my home without a warrant. Well, Trump says he can. And also that damaging his friend's car is a national security risk, and you might end up in prison in El Salvador. Devlin Barrett, reporting from Washington for the New York Post, says Trump administration lawyers have determined, they just have, that an 18th century wartime law the president has invoked to deport suspected members of a Venezuelan gang allows federal agents to enter homes without a warrant, according to people familiar with internal discussions. I mean, I've determined that this executive order gives me the power to demand free pizza for life, but so far nobody's listening to me. But you're all wrong about that. The disclosure reflects the Trump administration's aggressive view of presidential power, including setting aside a key provision of the Fourth Amendment that requires a court order to search someone's home, like on the police shows. It remains unclear whether the administration will apply the law in this way, but experts say such an interpretation would infringe on basic civil liberties and raise the potential for misuse. We fought a revolution over it, but whatever. Warrantless entries have some precedent in America's wartime history, but invoking the law in peacetime to pursue undocumented immigrants in such a way would be an entirely new application, they added. And again, normie alert here. Even if you're one of those normies who thinks, if you're in the country illegally, then whatever it takes, right? Well, what if they are in the country? Well, first of all, what if they're in the country legally, but we just don't like them? And two, what if they think they're in your house? Well, then you'll have an objection. I think that's a normie alert, right? Everybody kind of knows, you do those things, but by warrant. What makes what's the difference? Just for a second, what's the difference between searching your house with a warrant and without a warrant? Is it just that they don't have a piece of paper? Well, I think everybody sort of has a pretty good understanding of, for instance, if they were to seize evidence from your house that they searched without a warrant, it would be, I think people, have some idea about the phrase, the fruit of the poison tree. Even if you don't know the phrase, you pretty much, you have an inherent understanding that if they seize evidence from your house that they searched without a warrant, when it comes time to introduce that evidence at trial, which if it is introduced, the jury would probably convict you because, let's say, good solid evidence, right? But you find out it was seized without a warrant. What happens to it? Everybody has an inherent understanding. That doesn't get entered into evidence. The jury never hears it. If it's key evidence, you end up not being convicted on something that Trump would say, that's a technicality. And, you can understand that point of view. The evidence is real. It existed. The government got it. They wanted to show it to the jury. They couldn't because of the Fourth Amendment. Minus that Fourth Amendment, you're convicted. You did the thing probably because there's the evidence, but sometimes people get away with it because the Constitution has been violated. And you hear from time to time conservatives railing about that sort of thing. But what's the difference, though, in the broader sense between getting that? Why do you have to get that piece of paper? And the answer is because the piece of paper is issued by a judge, a magistrate judge, to whom you have to make some presentation that there's a reasonable chance of finding that evidence, that it's crucial evidence, and that allowing a search will turn it up. But we want the judges and the judicial system watching how we do this thing so that you can be assured when it comes to trial that this evidence was learned about on the up and up, seized on the up and up, and with minimal disruption, done in accordance with the law so that we can get that conviction later. In other words, due process. The guarantee that someone somewhere has taken evidence to a judge and that a reasonably competent judge has reviewed it. They almost never reject this stuff. So there's no reason for law enforcement to shy away unless they know that they're not really telling the truth to the judges. But essentially, this is a guarantee that a judge somewhere has agreed, okay, fine, you've made a decent case, go get that stuff. You've proven to me that that stuff is likely to be there and it's likely to lead to this conviction, go get it, have your trial. Same thing with deporting people to El Salvador. Minus the due process, you have no reason to believe that the people being deported are Venezuelan, are in the country illegally, are members of any gang whatsoever, or that they've even bothered to make sure that they're seizing people who look like they might be in such a gang. You don't know that it's not your neighbors. You don't know that it's not creditors of the Trump organization. You don't know that it's people that Elon Musk doesn't like. being labeled Venezuelan gang members so that they can be locked up outside the country. Normally, you have a judge checking some of it somewhere. That's the due process benefit for all of us. Same thing with issuing warrants, so that they're not just saying, I heard that Bob Menendez has gold bars in his house because he took them as a bribe, and I like gold bars. I wish they were mine. I'm going to send the cops to go take them and give them to me. That's what due process in issuing warrants and the requirement of a warrant benefits us all. It's so that, kleptomaniacs can't just simply raid our houses and take our stuff. What if somebody had a cooler car than a Tesla and Donald Trump wanted that? Could he just say, that guy's a terrorist, go take his car and give it to me? He could if there was no warrant required and no due process required. So that's kind of where we're going. Just thought I'd point that out to you. But will the administration do it? Well, it's not clear whether they will. It's just that someone wrote a memo saying you could. And they gave it to Donald Trump. You tell me what's 2 + 2. Well, as we say here, it undermines the fundamental protections that are recognized in the Fourth Amendment and in the Due Process Clause, said Christopher Slobogin. Maybe that's the pronunciation. He's a law professor at Vanderbilt University. Last week, Trump quietly signed a proclamation invoking the law known as the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. You heard all about that. Well, it grants him the authority to remove from the United States foreign citizens. Well, it purports to grant him that. Well, let's say it that way. The power to remove foreign citizens he has designated as alien enemies in case of war or an invasion, which we haven't had. His order took aim at Venezuelan citizens 14 or older who belong to the Tren de Aragua gang, or who he says belongs, who are not naturalized or lawful permanent residents. All such alien enemies, wherever found within any territory subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, are subject to summary apprehension, the proclamation said. Here's the trick. The administration lawyers say that this thing that says, wherever found within any territory subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, could include your house without a warrant. After all, isn't your house within territory subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? Yes. And if they're found in your basement, isn't that territory subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? Wherever we find them, they're subject to the deportation. Yeah, but I thought you meant, well, if we find them legally, like with a warrant and everything. Nope. No, it doesn't say anything about a warrant in this proclamation. I know, because you wrote the proclamation. You can't just write a proclamation that says, screw the Fourth Amendment, and say, therefore, the founders meant it this way. Oh, well, you may be pretty wrong about that. Senior lawyers at the Justice Department view that language, combined with the historical use of the law, and remember, it hasn't been used since there was a declared war, World War II. What were the times that Greg said? The War of 1812, World War I, World War II, and last week. Just one of these things is not like the other, right? But senior Justice Department lawyers say the language, combined with the historical use of the law, mean that the government does not need a warrant to enter a home or premises to search for people believed to be members of that gang, according to two officials familiar with the new policy. And I know that maybe even sounds like it's restricted. Well, as long as we're searching for people that we believe is a member of that gang, we can do it without a warrant. Well, no, but let's say that was true. What other restrictions fall by the wayside? I mean, if you enter the premises with a search warrant for a particular item, but you spot while you're in there in plain view something that might implicate somebody in another crime, you start to have some problems, right? So basically you can just say you can enter any house you want looking for illegal aliens, but if you find gold bars, let me have them? That shouldn't be the case. Anyway, a department spokesman declined to comment. Christopher Wellborn, the president of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, called the old law, the Alien Enemies Act, a relic that is dangerously prone to abuse, particularly when it comes to people's rights to privacy in their homes. The Fourth Amendment applies to everyone in the U.S., not just individuals with legal status, he said. That's a good reminder. Taking away that right would be an abuse of power that destroys our privacy, making Americans feel unsafe and vulnerable in the places where our children play and our loved ones sleep. Very true. Much more to it. You should absolutely read it. We're running low on time. We'll exit the article at this point. And I think we can use the balance of our time to highlight something that I think you ought to take a look at over the weekend. I mentioned it a couple of days ago and misattributed the source of it. I think I had wondered whether, I think Matthew Rigdon had texted me something else and pointed me at a different article. And another frequent correspondent, this time it was Mike Musson, who sent me this thing. And I want it on your radar, you people out there, for weekend reading. And here's the deal. It's about, it relates to the same subject. The Tren de Aragua thing. You may also have been struck with the thought, what the effing F is Tren de Aragua and where did they come from? I thought we were worried about MS-13. When they used to freak out. That was the gang we were worried about. Now, MS-13, to the extent it exists, is alleged to be a Salvadoran gang. And, you know, plenty of reason to make people afraid of, you know, if you're generally fear-mongering about Central American immigrants, Salvadorans, you know, or a large number of them, so we'll fearmonger about them. And they have a gang, and it's MS-13, and it's international, and it's terrible, and somebody killed somebody somewhere. Maybe true, maybe not, but that was the play they were making. By the way, to the extent that Salvadoran gangs are a problem in El Salvador, this whole prison system that we're now shipping the Venezuelans, maybe, to, it was built to fight, ostensibly, to fight El Salvador's gang problem. The problem with El Salvador fighting a gang problem is it's unclear to us why we should think that the government of El Salvador is a better and more trustworthy gang than the gangs they're fighting. In other words, it may very well be the case that this is just gang warfare, just like warlord warfare in Somalia, gang warfare in El Salvador, with one gang having, you know, gained access to the power of the government and then using it to suppress rival gangs. I don't know. You don't know. But the fact that the Trump administration is so comfortable with them makes you wonder about whether or not that might be the case. They could be honest brokers just invoking extraordinary powers in an attempt to suppress gang activity, after which a new era of open democracy will blossom in El Salvador. But I don't know anybody who thinks that. Anyway, that doesn't matter. That's MS-13. Now we're shifting focus to Tren de Aragua. Why the shift of focus? I think it's explained here in this piece, which leads us to piratewireservices.com. I'm not certain what that's about, Pirate Wire Services. Joshua Collins is the name of the author here. Is Pirate Wire Services? It looks like a Substack to me, so maybe that's just the name of the guy's Substack publication. Joshua Collins writes, Urban Legends and a Media Ecosphere, how the Tren de Aragua's infamy grew across the Americas. Subheader, dishonest politicians, paranoia, xenophobia, and a lack of real research have affected even well-meaning commentators. I'm a well-meaning commentator. Let's find out what's going on here and give you a sense of what you might want to read over the weekend. The Tren de Aragua, the so-called super gang that evolved in prisons in the Venezuelan state by the same name, I guess Aragua, has become a boogeyman of the Western Hemisphere in recent years. As the Venezuelan diaspora continues to grow, nearly 8 million people have fled the South American country since 2015. Xenophobia in the region has increased alongside it. Reports of Tren brutality and their supposed overwhelming power have become ubiquitous in media reports from across the continent, most recently in the United States. Politicians across the Americas have been eager to falsely blame migrants for high crime rates or invoke the name of the Tren to inspire fear among voters and build support for police crackdowns and anti-migration policies. Irresponsible or sensationalist media companies have been eager to repeat these claims, often without bothering to check if they're true. Reports repeated by other media companies until eventually a narrative of terror takes hold in the popular imagination. A legend begins to take on a life of its own. And what do you know? The President of the United States already agreeing that you should be thinking of supposed Tren de Aragua gang members as terrorists. There's the narrative of terror that's taking hold. As elections approach in the United States, and this article is dated from early October of last year, that gives now you understand the reasoning here. As elections approach in the United States, the Tren boogeyman has reached a fever pitch. False reports on social media about the presence of the Venezuelan criminal group there have gone viral, despite being disproved by authorities in the very cities these supposed incidents took place in. I missed the "in" before. You will recall that at the time was Aurora, Colorado, as I recall, right? Tren de Aragua gang has taken over entire apartment complexes. Yes, no, maybe. Stolen from the plot of New Jack City. I don't know. But anyway, a very interesting reminder of what might really be at work in building this urban legend, if it is one, up. So I recommend it to you for your consideration, Joshua Collins' piece. That gives you a flavor for it on our way out for the day. By the way, something that Justice shared with me yesterday on the way out the door, and I actually right after I had left the door, he said to me, here's something I haven't heard before. Here's a new one for you. Maybe you've heard something like this. But with all of the normie alerts happening, and the things that will make even normal people upset about what Dodgy is doing, have you heard this one? He says local MAGA around there where he is have convinced themselves that it is Nigerian and Vietnamese hackers who have infiltrated Social Security and are causing all the mayhem, not Musk and Dodgy. So to the extent that Dodgy's F-ups mean that people don't get their Social Security checks, MAGA is prepared to blame Nigerian and Vietnamese hackers.
From
really?
networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Anyway, time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for that West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Roundup coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. Well, as usual, a collection of stories from around the country and around the world, doubling back on some of the things we discussed for more discussion and revealing new lines of thought coming up next. We'll see you next week with real sound.